Hey there. Thanks for spending some time with me. If you're listening while you work or while the world is loud around you, this is your pocket of calm for a while. No hints, no spoilers, no extra setup. Just a clean start and a story that carries you forward. Whenever you're ready, I'll take you in. On the ice moon Calderis, the wind did not howl so much as scrape. It pushed powdered frost across the flats like a slow white tide. Caleb Stroud stepped off the drilling skiff and sank to his boots in knee-deep snow. He kept his shoulders low against the gusts and watched the horizon the way he watched crowded docking rings. The site sat in a shallow basin lit by portable flood towers, a bright island in the dark. A trench had been cut through the ice, wide enough for a cargo crawler, and at the bottom a curve of black metal broke through like the spine of something buried. Mara Vin waited near the nearest tower with a tablet pressed to her chest. She was the mission's geologic contractor on paper, and Caleb had learned paper rolls were easy to fake. "You were late," she said. "I'm on time," Caleb said. "The weather is early." Mara's eyes flicked toward the trench, then back to him. "The hull is warming, and that was not supposed to happen yet." Caleb followed her gaze and kept his distance from the trench edge. In the floodlight, the exposed metal held a faint sheen that did not match the rest. A thin line of meltwater crept along a seam, as if the ship itself was sweating. Caleb stayed on firm snow and watched the trickle widen by the second. "What changed?" he asked. Mara swallowed, as if the cold had tightened her throat. The signal changed and it got louder. Caleb's wrist display vibrated in a steady pulse that matched the feeling in his fingers. It was not sound in the air, but a pattern his suit sensors translated into sensation. All pulse, all pulse, all pulse, all pulse. It felt like a slow heartbeat, and his skin tightened as if his body wanted to answer. "You said it was a beacon?" he asked. "It was," Mara said, "or I thought it was, and I do not know what it is now." Caleb looked back toward the skiff pad and the track that led to the surface rail. It was the only clean route out once this basin filled with machines and men. A low hum rose from the far side of the basin. Headlights appeared through blowing snow. 6 vehicles in tight formation with the same corporate markings on their hulls. Mara's face drained of color. "They are here already." Caleb watched the lead crawler crest the ridge and angled down toward the lights. "Who is they?" Mara hesitated, and that told him more than any fast lie. "Heliarch Recovery, and they own the claim above us." Caleb held her eyes. "Do they know now?" Mara's jaw tightened. Someone told them. The crawlers rolled into the basin and fanned out with practiced precision. Men and women in gray, cold suits dismounted with rifles slung low, not pointed yet, but ready. Their mirrored visors hid their faces and their stance set authority. Caleb counted positions without moving his head, then marked the exits they were taking away. The last vehicle carried a compact module with a white insignia on the side. It was a clean team marker, the kind used for contamination response and evidence control, the kind used when a corporation intended a scene to end with nothing left behind. A tall woman walked ahead of them with legal status tags on her suit. She held a tablet and moved like she already owned the ground. She stopped 10 paces from Caleb and Mara, and her voice came through external speakers, calm and amplified. "Caleb Stroud, licensed private rescue contractor, Meridian Fringe Registry." Caleb did not react outwardly. "That depends on who is asking." "My name is Director Celine Rook of Heliarch," she said. "I represent Heliarch Recovery and all subsidiary rights on this ice shelf." She raised her tablet. "You and your companion are trespassing on an active claim, and you will step away from the trench. You will surrender any data you have acquired." Rook continued. "You will submit to an inspection and a transport back to the surface rail." Mara's hand tightened around her own tablet until her knuckles whitened. Caleb kept his breathing steady and let his eyes do the work. The crawlers had parked to block the track behind them. The skiff pad sat in a clean line of fire if those rifles ever came up. The clean team module waited, like a coffin on treads. The pulse in Caleb's wrist kept tapping like a metronome that bodies wanted to follow. "You came fast," Caleb said. Rook's head tilted slightly. "We came as soon as we received notice of a potential hazardous artifact, and we are required to respond." What is the hazard? Caleb asked. Rook's tone did not change. Unknown technology, unknown contamination risk, and the possibility of illicit salvage trafficking. Mara's breath hitched. We did not traffic anything. Rook looked at her with polite blankness. Then you will have no objection to a clean team audit. Caleb felt the pulse again and saw one gray-suited guard shift weight, as if he felt it too. Caleb kept his voice level and his hand still. You are blocking our exit, he said. We are controlling the site, Rook replied. For your safety. Caleb let a second pass in silence. Then he nodded toward the exposed hull. If you trap us here and the basin floods, you'll have bodies on your claim, he said. Flooding or not, you will own the consequences. Rook's lips pressed together and irritation showed for the first time. Flooding is not forecast. Caleb nodded toward the trench again. Then explain why it is sweating. Rook's eyes flicked to the trench and back. It was a small movement, but it mattered. Mara took the opening. The ship is warming from inside, and it should be inert. Rook studied them both. How long have you been here? Long enough to know the signal is not normal, Mara said. It is getting stronger. Rook lifted her hand, and a clean team member stepped forward with a scanner wand. We will determine what is normal. Caleb's mind ran through options, and none of them were clean. He could fight out, but that would bury any chance of walking away with the truth. He could comply, but he saw the way the crawlers had parked and the way the clean team module waited. Compliance ended with erasure. Mara's eyes met his, and in that brief look he read fear and insistence. She had brought him here for a reason, and it was not the pay. Caleb lowered his voice so only she could hear. Mara, why did you hire me? Mara's lips parted, then closed. Her eyes flicked toward the trench and the meltwater line that had grown into a trickle. Because it is not empty, she said. Caleb felt the air sharpen around him. There are people inside. Mara nodded once. Or what is left of them, and there are pods. Rook's gaze snapped to Mara. Pods. Mara stiffened, and Caleb knew she had slipped. Life had legal weight, and weight brought obligations and liabilities. You will hand over that tablet now, Rook said. Mara clutched it tighter. If there are survivors, we have to extract them. Rook took a slow breath. If there are survivors, they are now under Heliarch custodianship by claim law. Caleb stepped slightly in front of Mara, not as a shield but as a statement. Claim law does not outrank emergency salvage protocols. Rook's eyes held his visor. On Caldris, it does. The pulse hit again, stronger, and Caleb felt it in his teeth. For a moment, his heartbeat tried to match it, like his body was taking instruction. He steadied his breath and forced his mind to stay separate. He did not give the rhythm a clean grip. Rook lifted her hand again. Secure them. The guards raised rifles, not to fire but to aim. The clean team member with the scanner moved closer, and the meltwater became a small stream. Caleb's hand moved to his sling, but he did not draw. He looked once at the track that was blocked and once at the trench that was open. Last warning, he said. You do not want to struggle this close to unknown tech. Rook's voice stayed even. You do not want to be charged with interfering with a containment operation. Caleb felt Mara tremble behind him, not from cold. It was the moment when the right thing was about to be taken away. He looked down into the trench again and saw the hull was not just warming. It was responding, and the pulse felt like it came through ice and bone. Caleb made his decision and grabbed Mara's wrist. He pulled her 2 steps back toward the nearest flood tower to break the line of aim. Run, he said. Mara stumbled, then found her footing. The first guard stepped forward, and Caleb moved before the gap closed. Caleb threw a compact smoke canister into the snow between them. It burst into a dense gray cloud that the wind smeared low across the basin. He did not run for the exit that was blocked. He ran for the trench, because if they trapped him, he would change the battlefield. Caleb hit the trench edge and slid down the cut slope, boots skidding on packed ice. He landed hard at the bottom beside the exposed hull, knees flexing to take the shock. Above him, shouts cut through the wind and boots crunched on ice. Mara's voice called his name, distant and thin. The metal under Caleb's glove felt warmer than it should, not hot, but alive with internal heat. He found the seam Mara had seen and wedged his fingers into it. The seam resisted, then gave with a soft release like a door unlocking. A panel slid inward enough to reveal darkness, and a breath of air flowed out, cold and stale, with a faint metallic scent. The pulse intensified as if the ship had noticed him. Caleb slipped into the gap and pulled himself through. Inside, the darkness swallowed the floodlight and his suit lamps clicked on. Narrow cones of light cut across a corridor that curved with the hull. Frost coated the walls in branching patterns. Beneath it, the metal held a smooth geometry that did not look like human weld lines. His boot hit something under the frost, and he looked down. A cable bundle lay across the floor, thick as his arm and coated in ice, running along the corridor like a vein. The pulse came again, and his lamps flickered. Footsteps scraped behind him as Heliarch guards entered the trench. Caleb yanked the panel wider, just enough for another person. Then he shoved it shut from inside, but it did not latch. He needed time, not a miracle. He pulled out a compact seal strip and pressed it along the seam. It bonded fast, meant for hole patches, not doors, but it would hold for a minute. Caleb listened to the wind outside fade into the hull and forced his voice steady. "Mara, if you can hear me, get into the trench and into the ship," he said. "Do not let them take your tablet." Static answered, thin and broken. He tried again. "Mara reply?" he asked. A faint click came through, then her voice tight with effort. "I am in the smoke and they are cutting around." "Good," Caleb said. "You said pods, so where?" "I only saw reflections," Mara said. "Deeper, past the first bulkheads." "Hey." Dull thump hit the sealed panel behind Caleb. Rook's voice came faintly through the metal, distorted by thickness and frost. "Open the hatch. This is a containment order," Rook said. Caleb did not answer and moved forward. The corridor opened into a larger chamber that felt like a service bay. A collapsed rack lay on its side, and frozen tools were scattered like bones. His lamps caught a human object half buried in frost. It was a mining helmet with an old company logo, scratched and cracked. Caleb knelt and brushed ice away with his glove. The helmet's interior was empty, and the strap was torn like it had been ripped off in panic. Caleb felt his stomach tighten, not from fear, but from confirmation. Someone had been here before, and it ended badly. Caleb stood and listened for any sound that was not the pulse. Beneath the pulse, a faint mechanical ticking ran steady. It sounded like cooling metal, but too consistent to ignore. Caleb followed the cable bundle as it ran into a wall panel that was not fully sealed. Meltwater had dripped here too, leaving a thin trail down to the floor. He pried the panel open with a utility bar. Behind it, a narrow access tube sloped down into warmer air. The air smelled faintly of ozone, and the pulse hit again, making his vision blur for a fraction of a second. It felt like the rhythm was trying to take his focus the way a chant pulls a crowd. Caleb tightened his jaw and forced his mind back to his objective. Find survivors, get them out, and keep Heliarch from burying the site. He slid into the tube and descended, shoulders brushing the sides. The metal felt smoother here, less frosted, and the warmth rose with each meter. The tube ended in a corridor lined with pods. They were not human cryopods. They were taller and narrower with translucent fronts coated in frost. Shapes shifted faintly behind the ice, or the ice made it look that way under lamp glare. Caleb approached the nearest pod and wiped frost away. Behind the translucent panel, he saw a body that was not human. It had a long torso and limbs folded tight, with pale layered skin like thin plates. Its head was elongated, and where eyes should be there were closed ridges, as if it sensed the world by something other than sight. The pod panel was dark, but the pulse felt strongest here. Caleb stepped back and forced his breathing steady. His radio crackled, and Mara's voice came through breathless. "Caleb, I made it into the trench, and they're sealing the basin route." "Get inside," Caleb said. "Now." "I am at the seam," she said. "They are right behind me." Caleb looked up the access tube and judged the distance. He could not reach her in time, not before Cutters opened his patch. He scanned the pod corridor and saw several pods shattered at the far end. Ice spilled from them like broken glass across the floor. Beneath one shattered pod lay a human body in a cold suit, face hidden by frost. Caleb walked to it and stopped close enough to confirm without touching the face. The suit was torn at the throat, as if something had pulled it open. Caleb took a slow breath and did not allow himself to linger. He pulled the body's wrist display out from under the ice. The screen was dead, but the casing carried a serial tag he could still read. A name flashed in his mind from an old missing persons bulletin. Someone had vanished in the cold, and the report had gone quiet. Mara's voice hissed in his ear, urgent. Caleb, I cannot open it. The seam is sealed from outside. Caleb felt a surge of cold anger, sharp and controlled. They locked it. Yes, Mara said. They're cutting a new hole, and they're coming in. Caleb followed the cable trunk to a junction where cables merged into a thicker bundle that disappeared into the wall. It felt like a control point, the place a system would listen. He found a panel with no human markings, only shallow grooves where hands might go. He pressed his gloved palm to it, and the grooves warmed under his touch. The pulse shifted and became more insistent, like a metronome trying to pull bodies into step. His suit display flickered and stabilized. A line flashed on his suit display that read synchronization in progress. The words were plain English, like the ship had chosen a language from his systems. Caleb's throat tightened. No, he pulled his hand away, but the ship did not stop. The pulse grew stronger, and his heartbeat tried to follow it. Mara gasped over the radio. I feel it. It is in my chest. Caleb forced his breathing into a different rhythm. He counted silently against the beat, like stepping off a moving walkway. Focus on my voice, he said. Do not match it. What is it? Mara whispered. Caleb did not know fully, but he knew enough to name the danger. It is a control rhythm, like a metronome that tries to lead your nerves. If it finished, it would not matter who owned the claim. People would become tools before they decided to. Caleb reached into his sling and pulled a compact signal jammer meant to block short-range tracking tags. It was crude compared to this, but it could still trip a pattern. He activated it and set it beside the cable trunk. The jammer hummed and the pulse stuttered, not stopped, but staggered like a heartbeat skipping. Mara exhaled sharply. It eased. His suit display flickered again. A line flashed that read, interference detected. Caleb stared at it and felt his mouth go dry. The ship was aware, and awareness meant response. Another line appeared that read, remove interference. The request was simple, like a command a body would obey before thought. A soft scrape sounded behind Caleb, like something sliding across ice. He turned his lamps toward the shattered pod at the end of the row. Movement filled the darkness where there should have been none. A pale plated figure pulled itself out of the broken pod, slow at first, then with growing coordination. Its limbs unfolded and its ridged head angled toward Caleb, as if it sensed him without eyes. Caleb backed up and kept his posture calm, not threatening. His hand moved to his stun baton, non-lethal by design. The creature took a step and the pulse around it shifted to match its movement, as if it carried the rhythm with it. Muffled voices crackled on the radio, and Mara whispered, Caleb, they are in. Caleb looked at the creature, then at the jammer, and understanding hit him clean and ugly. The ship was using the rhythm to wake guardians, and the jammer had become the irritant it wanted removed. The creature moved again, faster now. Caleb swung his baton, not to strike, but to mark a boundary. Stay back, he said. The creature did not react to tone. It reacted to rhythm, and it lunged. Caleb pivoted and struck its shoulder plate with the baton. The impact vibrated through his arm, and the creature recoiled, then pressed forward again as if pain was a distant concept. Caleb kicked the jammer farther down the corridor, away from the cable trunk. The creature snapped its head toward the jammer and changed direction at once. Caleb took the chance and ran up the access tube. The tight passage forced his shoulders in, and he felt the heat rising as if the ship was waking deeper inside. He emerged into the upper bay as the sealed panel behind him shuddered. A cutter blade bit into it from the outside, and sparks pushed through the seam. Caleb crossed the bay to the far wall and searched for another route. He found a maintenance passage that was narrow and steep, angling toward what felt like the ship's center. Mara's voice came through closer now, breathless and moving. Caleb, I'm inside the first bay, and they have lights. Move away from the trench seam, Caleb said. Follow the wall until you find a narrow passage that slopes down. What if I lose you? Mara asked. Caleb kept his voice flat. You will not. He slipped into the passage and descended. The interior grew warmer, and the ice on the walls thinned into wet streaks. The pulse was everywhere, and here it carried a low vibration like a core humming under load. Caleb reached a junction where 3 corridors met and paused to listen. Behind him, boots scraped on metal and voices echoed with confidence. Heliarch guards were inside and moving like they owned the space. Caleb turned left and followed the stronger vibration. The corridor narrowed and the air tasted cleaner, like filtered heat. A door blocked the path, sealed and different from the others. Someone had bolted a crude human interface onto it, forcing compatibility. A salvage lock, and the bolts looked new against old hull. Caleb pressed his hand to the human interface, and a suit display flashed a line that read "Access denied." He tried a manual override key, and it did nothing. The pulse hit hard, dizziness rose, then passed, and Caleb forced his vision to steady. Heliarch had done this, and not for safety. They had sealed whatever was behind the door to control access, either to keep something in or keep others out. Mara's voice came faint, moving with breath in her words. Caleb, I found the passage, and I hear them behind me. Keep moving, Caleb said. Slow breaths, and do not match the beat. He pulled a compact thermal saw from his sling. He set it against the salvage lock bolts, and the saw whined into life. A voice echoed from the corridor behind him, amplified and calm as ever. Mr. Stroud, you are interfering with a containment operation. Caleb did not look back. You sealed this door, and you were here before. Rook's voice stayed polite. We have responded to many incidents on Calderis. Caleb finished cutting the first bolt. You left a man dead in a pod corridor. Silence held for a fraction of a second. Then Rook spoke again, slightly sharper. You have no evidence of that. Caleb cut the second bolt. I have his wrist tag. Rook's tone shifted, no longer public calm, more private and intent. If you keep talking, you will not leave this ship. Caleb cut the last bolt and kicked the salvage lock free. It clattered to the floor, and the door seam glowed faintly as internal heat met cold air. With a slow mechanical release, the door slid open. Warm air rolled out, carrying a scent like clean metal and disinfectant. Caleb stepped into a chamber that did not look abandoned. The walls were smoother, less frosted, and dim lights still glowed in the ceiling. In the center stood a ring-shaped apparatus, a vertical loop of metal and translucent material. Consoles hummed around it, not human consoles, but surfaces with shifting patterns. His suit display flickered. A line flashed that read, Sync Chamber Active. Caleb felt his stomach drop, because this felt like the heart of the rhythm. The pulse here was stronger and layered, like a song with instructions hidden inside it. He took one step, and his knees almost buckled. His nervous system tried to comply before he chose anything. Caleb gritted his teeth and forced his body upright. He grabbed a memory as an anchor, not comfort, just a solid point. A small hand gripping his sleeve in a crowded evacuation corridor years ago. A child he carried out of a burning habitat ring while alarm screamed. He did not abandon people because it was noble. He did it because he could not live with himself if he did not. That was his leverage against the rhythm. It was his own. He moved toward the ring and saw human cables running from a sealed compartment into the alien console surface. Heliarch had tapped the ship like a thief wiring into a vault. A stolen translation layer glowed on a nearby panel. It showed a progress bar and a countdown, and Caleb read it once. Less than 6 hours until full synchronization. Less than 6 hours until the rhythm could spread beyond this ship. Caleb looked at the cables and understood Heliarch was not here to erase the ship. They were here to own the rhythm, and ownership meant weapon. A faint knock came from the sealed compartment. It was not random noise, but a pattern that sounded human. Caleb stepped closer and put his ear near the seam. Another knock came, 3 taps, a pause, then 2 taps. Someone is in there, Caleb said. Rook's voice echoed from the doorway behind him. Step away. Caleb turned slowly and saw Director Rook of Heliarch in the doorway with 2 guards. Rifles were aimed now, not at his chest, but at his head. Behind them, Mara appeared with her hands raised and her tablet pinned against her side. A guard had a grip on her arm. Mara's eyes met Caleb's, and he saw desperation and determination. Rook spoke as if the conclusion had already been written. You found the chamber, and that was inevitable, Rook said. Caleb kept his voice steady. You have someone sealed in there. Rook did not deny it. A survivor, a liability, and a key. Caleb stared at her and felt the pieces click. You were going to keep them alive by controlling access to treatment. Rook's mouth tightened. They are not stable without the ship support, and we provide what they need. Mara's voice shook. You are holding them hostage. Rook's gaze shifted to Mara. I am preventing a contagion event and preventing theft, and I am preventing you from making Caldrus a grave. Caleb's mind ran fast and cold. He could not fight 3 rifles in a narrow doorway, and he needed a lever that did not bleed out in seconds. He looked at the ring apparatus and felt it waiting. The pulse here felt like a system expecting a command from an operator. If the rhythm finishes syncing, it will not just affect the survivor. Caleb said, it will affect all of us. Rook's eyes did not blink. We have dampeners, and we can manage exposure. It sounded like ear protection in a storm, and Caleb did not believe it. He nodded toward her guards without moving too much. Do you? He asked. Your guards are sweating in sub-zero cold. One guard shifted, and Caleb saw a tiny tremor in the hand holding the rifle. Rook's voice stayed smooth, but her stance stiffened. Mr. Stroud, you will step away from the console, Rook said. You will surrender your equipment. Caleb lifted his hand slowly, not toward a weapon, but toward the console surface. Rook's rifle muzzle twitched. Do not, Rook said. Caleb kept his voice soft. If you shoot me, you lose the only person here who knows rescue protocols, and you lose Mara's data. Mara's jaw set like she would throw the tablet into the ice before handing it over. Rook's eyes narrowed as she calculated. Caleb touched the console, and the surface warmed under his glove. His suit display flashed a line that read operator present. The pulse wrapped around his nerves like a net, but he held his mind tight. He kept breathing offbeat, like walking against a crowd current. What is the survivor's name? Caleb asked. Rook's expression did not change. It does not matter. It matters, Caleb said. To me. Rook hesitated, then answered. Dr. Ilaris Sen. Mara inhaled sharply. She is a Xenonuro specialist, and she disappeared 2 years ago. Caleb filed that away and looked back at the sealed compartment. He chose his words with care, like a hand on a live wire. Dr. Sen, can you hear me? He asked. A pause answered, then the knock came again, weaker. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 taps. I'm Caleb Stroud, he said. I do rescues, and I am not Heliarch. If I open this, can you walk? Caleb asked. A faint scratch came, like a hand dragging against metal. Mara's voice trembled. She is alive. Rook's tone hardened. Enough, step away now. Caleb knew he was out of time. He made the irreversible choice with the calm he used when doors were burning behind him. He yanked the jammer from his sling and slammed it onto the console surface. The jammer whined at full power, and the chamber's pulse stuttered violently. Lights flickered in the ring apparatus, flared with internal glow. Rook's guard shouted, and one rifle fired a single shot into the wall beside Caleb's head. Caleb did not flinch. He grabbed the human cables feeding into the sealed compartment and ripped them free. The chamber screamed without sound, vibration hammering his teeth. The pulse became chaotic like a heart in panic. Mara cried out as the guard holding her stumbled body tried to match a rhythm that no longer held steady. Caleb ran to the compartment seam and used his thermal saw on the emergency release bolts. He cut fast despite shaking hands. Rook stepped forward with her rifle raised and her voice turned sharp. Stop, you will kill her, Rook said. Caleb did not look at her. You are going to use her, and I'm taking her out. The bolts fell away and the compartment door hissed as pressure equalized. It slid open and warm air rolled out like breath. Inside, a A woman lay strapped to a support frame, pale, eyes half open, breathing shallow. Tubes ran from the ship into her suit ports. Dr. Alarasen's gaze found Caleb, unfocused but aware. Her lips moved, but no sound came at first. Caleb leaned close. "Can you speak?" he asked. Her voice came as a rasp. "Do not let it finish." Caleb nodded once. "I'm trying." He began disconnecting tubes, careful but fast. Rook's voice came lower, almost pleading. "You do not understand. She is the only one who could translate the rhythm safely," Rook said. Alara's eyes sharpened with effort, and she looked past Caleb toward Rook. "You cannot own it," she whispered. "It owns you," Alara said. Caleb felt a chill that was not from cold. He lifted Alara into his arms, and her weight surprised him with how little it was. She trembled as if the ship's rhythm had been holding her together. Mara broke free as the guard holding her dropped to his knees with hands on his helmet. "We have to go now," Mara said. Caleb looked at the chamber and saw the ring glow brighter and unstable. The pulse had become a chaotic storm, like an engine hunting for a stable cycle. He grabbed the jammer and wedged it into the cable trunk at the base of the console, forcing it deep. The jammer's harsh hum steadied, and the chamber glow faltered. Alara whispered against his shoulder, "It will fight back." Caleb turned toward the door. Director Rook of Heliarch still blocked the doorway, rifle raised, but her eyes had changed. She looked less like a lawyer and more like someone realizing she was not in control. Caleb's voice was cold. "Move," he said. Rook did not move, and Mara stepped forward with her tablet raised. Her hand shook, but her voice held. "I have data," Mara said. "Proof you sealed survivors, and proof people died." Rook's gaze snapped to the tablet. "You will not leave with that." "Try to stop me," Mara said. Caleb shifted Alara's weight, and his stance told Rook the truth. He would go through her if he had to. Rook made her choice and stepped aside. Caleb passed the threshold with Alara in his arms, and Mara stayed close at his left. They ran through corridors that steamed as ice melted under rising internal heat. The ship was waking, and it was not happy. A pale shape appeared at the far end of the corridor ahead. One plated creature standing in their path. Caleb stopped and set Alara against the wall gently. The creature tilted its head and the pulse around it surged, trying to pull Caleb's nerves into alignment. Caleb forced his breath into a different pattern and raised his baton. He struck the creature's knee joint. It buckled slightly, recovered, and moved again. Mara shouted, "Caleb, behind you?" Two more creatures emerged from side passages, drawn by chaos and drawn to remove interference. Caleb did not waste motion, because hesitation was an invitation. He grabbed a portable flood flare from his sling and threw it down the corridor. It ignited in harsh white light, and the passage filled with glare. The creatures recoiled, not blinded, but disrupted, as if their sensing got noisy. Their coordination faltered, and Caleb used the gap. He lifted Alara again and pushed forward. He slipped past the creatures while their movements stuttered. They reached the upper bay and headed for the trench seam Caleb had patched. The panel was half cut open now, and Heliarch guards had breached it. Those guards were not steady anymore. Several were hunched with hands on helmets, bodies trembling as if their hearts were trying to follow too many beats at once. Mara stared at them, horrified. "It is hitting everyone." Alara's voice was faint but urgent. "The rhythm is trying to resynchronize, and it will choose the strongest carriers." It was like a contagious marching beat that spread through bodies, not lungs. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. "How do we stop it?" Caleb asked. "You have to starve it," Alara said. "No power, no closed loop, and break the ring." Caleb looked back into the ship, deeper than he could safely reach. He could not go back through the creatures and the chaos and still carry Alara. But he had another lever. The trench and the ice around the ship was already weakening, and meltwater was flowing. If the basin flooded, it would cut access, and it might also shock the ship's hot systems. It was dangerous enough to kill people, and dangerous enough to stop a system that lived on stability. Caleb climbed through the breach and out into the trench, boots slipping on wet ice. Mara climbed beside him, close enough to grab if he fell, while Alara clung to his suit. Above, the basin was chaos under flickering floodlights. Heliarch crawlers sat like dark beasts, and the clean team module was open with people scrambling. Director Rook of Heliarch stood near a crawler, shouting orders into the wind. Her voice was swallowed by gusts and by the pulse trying to reassert itself. Caleb carried Alara up the trench slope toward the nearest flood tower. Mara stayed at his right, panting, eyes scanning the blocked route. They sealed the route. The crawlers block it, Mara said. Caleb looked at the track and saw the barricade line. Behind it, the exit path led to the surface rail and safety. He scanned the basin and spotted a heavy drilling unit near the trench edge. Its thermal lance was still embedded in the ice, pumping heat downward. That was why the hull had been sweating. That was why the basin would flood. Caleb looked to Mara. Can you control the drill? Mara blinked. I can, Watt. We make the flood happen on our terms, Caleb said. We drown the chamber before it finishes. Mara's face tightened. If we do that, we might not get out. If we do not, the rhythm finishes, Caleb said. And nobody gets out free. Alara lifted her head weakly. He is right, she whispered. It will not stop unless you force a thermal collapse, and you have to drown the chamber, Alara said. Mara stared at Alara. You know what it is? Alara held Mara's eyes. I know what it does, and it cannot be made safe. Caleb moved to the drill control console mounted on the unit. A reminder flashed on the console that read, Manual Override Locked. A corporate lock meant control, and control meant leverage. Caleb looked across the basin at Director Rook of Heliarch. Rook, watch him now, visor turned toward the drill. Caleb raised his voice through suit speakers. Rook, unlock the drill, Caleb said. You will not sabotage my claim, Rook called back. Then you will die on it, Caleb said. Rook gestured, and two guards moved toward Caleb with rifles raised. Caleb stepped in front of the console, keeping his body between the guards and Mara and Alara. Mara whispered, Caleb, do not. Caleb answered without turning. I'm not dying in the ice because a lawyer won a patent. He pulled a small flare gun and fired it into the sky. The flare burst above the basin in a bright arc visible for kilometers. Rook snapped her head up, and Caleb saw fear flash through her posture. A flare was not just light, it was a message that someone else could see. Mara's eyes widened. You called help? I called witnesses, Caleb said. Rook shouted, anger breaking through. You were making this public? Caleb looked at her. Yes. The guards hesitated, and in that hesitation Caleb felt the ship's pulse ripple through the basin again. One guard near Rook staggered and grabbed a crawler for balance. Rook's voice cracked. What is happening? Alara whispered. It is looking for carriers, and it will use anyone. Mara looked from the trembling guard to Caleb. We have to end this now. Caleb nodded. Unlock the drill, or I do it the hard way. Mara stared at the lock. Hard way how? Caleb pointed at the drill's fuel line. I cut it, and it runs hot, and it will overload. Mara's face tightened. That could blow the unit. Caleb's tone did not change. Yes. Rook shouted, do not. Caleb kept his voice steady. Unlock it. Wind scraped across the basin, and the pulse pressed at the edges of hearing. Then Rook lifted her tablet and made a gesture. The drill console beeped, and a line flashed that read, Override granted. Mara inhaled sharply. Rook's voice carried across the basin, tight. You have one chance to stop, and if you flood this, you will be charged with sabotage and murder. Caleb did not answer and handed control to Mara. Maximum heat, directed down and inward toward the ship's core. Mara's hand shook, but she took the controls. This will collapse the trench. Caleb shifted Alara's weight and looked at the blocked route. Then we move now. Mara engaged the drill, and deep vibration ran through the ice. Heat surged down, and steam rose from the trench like breath. The exposed hull below glowed faintly, and meltwater increased. Alara trembled in Caleb's arms. It will react, Alara whispered. The pulse changed as if on cue, faster and more aggressive, trying to outrun the flood. Caleb headed straight for the barricaded track with Mara close at his side. Heliarch guards stepped into their path with rifles raised again. Caleb did not slow, because slowing taught them they had control. He watched the closest guard's knees and breathing and saw instability. The rhythm was inside the guard too. "Move," Caleb said. The guard hesitated, and the visor turned slightly, as if listening to a private command. Caleb stepped closer and lowered his voice. "You feel it, do you not?" Caleb asked. The guard's rifle wavered. Caleb stayed calm and kept his hands open. "You're not trained for this, and your director is not trained for this," Caleb said. "Move, or you become the ship's hand." The guard's stance broke, and the guard stepped aside. Two others followed, less from obedience than fear. Rook shouted, "Stop them." Her command did not carry the same weight now. The rhythm had introduced a new authority that did not care about corporate law. Caleb and Mara reached the first crawler with its engine running. Heat steamed from vents into the wind. Caleb opened the door and climbed into the cabin with Alara. He laid her across the back bench and checked her breathing once. "I do not have keys," Mara said from the driver's seat. Caleb reached under the dash and pulled a manual ignition bypass. He did not explain it, because Mara did not need a lesson, only an outcome. The engine surged, and Mara drove straight into the barricade line. Metal groaned, and ice cracked as one crawler shoved another aside. The pulse in the air spiked like a scream. Behind them, the trench collapsed partially and water poured in, flooding the ship's access. Steam erupted from vents in the ice as hot components met cold water. Alara's eyes fluttered open. "Good," she whispered. "Drown it." The crawler broke through the line and roared onto the track toward the surface rail. Behind them, basin lights flickered and went out one by one. The ship's pulse stuttered, surged, then stuttered again. Caleb looked back through the rear window and watched the exposed hull sink under rising water. A plume of steam rose like a white pillar. Director Rook of Heliarch stood near the basin edge, posture rigid, watching her claim disappear under flood. The pulse hit one last time, strong and furious, and then went silent. Caleb felt the release in his chest, like quiet after constant noise. Mara exhaled shakily. "Is it over?" Alara's eyes stayed half open. "It is not finished, but you interrupted the synchronization." Caleb's voice was low. "Interrupted is not enough." Alara swallowed. "You bought time, and that is what rescues are." The crawler raced across the ice flats toward the rail tower that marked the route back to orbit. In the distance, a small light approached fast from the sky. A patrol craft, not Heliarch. Caleb watched it descend and let controlled relief settle in. Witnesses were coming. Mara's voice trembled. "What happens now?" Mara asked. Caleb looked at her, then at Alara. "Now we tell the truth before someone edits it." Mara nodded, eyes wet. "I will upload the data." Alara's hand twitched weakly. "Do it soon, and if they cannot own the rhythm, they will bury it." Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. "Let them try." The patrol craft landed near the rail tower and kicked up snow in a spinning cloud. Caleb and Mara stepped out with Alara supported between them, and uniformed officers approached with cautious stances. One officer raised a hand. "Identify yourselves." Caleb met the officer's gaze. "Rescue contractor Caleb Stroud, and we have a missing doctor." Mara lifted her tablet. "An evidence of corporate homicide and illegal containment." The officer's eyes widened slightly. "What did you find?" Caleb kept his voice controlled. "A ship under the ice, and a signal that tries to turn people into tools." The officer looked past them at the flooded basin in the distance. Steam rose in thin pillars that drifted and vanished. Alara's voice came faint but clear. "If you do not quarantine the ice shelf and cut corporate access, you will lose more than a claim." The officer swallowed. "Under whose authority?" Caleb did not hesitate. "Under public authority, because we are making it public now." Mara's fingers moved on her tablet, and her face tightened with resolve. She pressed the upload command, and a line on her tablet read, "Transmitting to OpenNet." That moment could not be undone. A flood behind them, a signal interrupted, and a corporation exposed. 3 hours later, the rail tower operations room felt cramped with uniforms and cold breath. Caleb sat against a wall with his arms folded while technicians wrapped Alara in warming blankets and routed her into a med pod. Mara stood near a communications console, answering questions in short bursts. She did not perform. She only told what she saw, and the room grew heavier with every sentence. A senior investigator approached Caleb and lowered his voice. Heliarch is filing injunctions already, and they claim your data is stolen property. Caleb's face did not change. They can file whatever they want. The senior investigator hesitated. They also claim you sabotaged the site. Caleb nodded slightly. Yes. The senior investigator blinked. You admit it? Caleb's voice stayed flat. I flooded a ship that was trying to synchronize human nerves, and I did it to stop it. If you want to charge me, do it, Caleb continued. I will say it again on record. The senior investigator looked away, then back. We do not even have a statute for what you described. Caleb's eyes stayed steady. Then write one. The senior investigator exhaled. What if Heliarch is right about one thing, and the ship is a contamination risk? Caleb thought of trembling guards and bodies trying to follow a beat that was not theirs. He answered without drama. It is a contamination risk, Caleb said, just not the kind your labs are used to. The senior investigator lowered his voice. And Dr. Sin, what is her status? Caleb glanced toward the med pod. Alara's eyes were closed, but her breathing was steadier. Alive, Caleb said. Not free, not yet. The senior investigator studied him. You care about that. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. She did not deserve what they did to her. A pause held. Then the senior investigator asked, Why did you really come to Caldress, Mr. Stroud? Caleb looked at the senior investigator and let a sliver of truth show. I came because people disappear when corporations want them to. And I learned what happens when nobody comes back, Caleb added. The senior investigator held his gaze. Is that personal? Caleb's voice stayed quiet. Yes. The senior investigator nodded slowly. You will be questioned again, but for now you are under protective hold. Caleb's lips twitched, almost a smile dry. Protective hold sounds like a polite cage. The senior investigator's expression tightened. It is safer than the alternative. Caleb's eyes flicked to the communications console where Mara stood. Her tablet showed the upload completed, and the OpenNet feed was already spreading. Caleb stood and walked to Mara. She looked up, eyes tired. It is out, Mara said. Everyone can see it now. Caleb nodded once. Good. Mara swallowed. Heliarch will come. Caleb's voice stayed calm. Yes. Mara's hands trembled slightly. They will blame us for the flood, and they will say we killed people. Caleb looked at her. Did you see anyone die because of us? Mara shook her head. No. Then do not borrow guilt, Caleb said. Do not carry what is not yours. Mara blinked hard and her eyes filled. You make it sound easy. Caleb's gaze softened a fraction. It is not easy, it is necessary. A technician called Caleb's name. Dr. Sin is awake, and she wants to speak with you. Caleb walked to the med pod and stopped close enough for her to see his visor. Alara lay inside with warming coils around her arms, and her eyes tracked him. You flooded it, Alara whispered. Caleb nodded. Yes. Alara closed her eyes briefly. Thank you. Caleb lowered his voice. You were in there for 2 years. Alara swallowed. I was in there for as long as they needed me. Caleb leaned closer. What is the rhythm? Alara opened her eyes and fear sat there, sharp and honest. It is a control protocol, a living one, and it uses patterns nervous systems cannot ignore. It does not hack machines, Alara said. It hacks bodies. Caleb felt his skin tighten. Where did it come from? Alara's breath hitched. The ship is not a ship the way you think. It is a carrier. It is like a seed pod that waits until it finds minds to copy, Alara said. It learns you by pulling you into its beat. Caleb held his tone even. Can it spread beyond the ice? Alara looked at him, and her answer was quiet. If it finishes sinking with enough carriers, yes. Caleb's jaw tightened. We interrupted it. Alara nodded faintly. You bought time, but Heliarch will not stop. They will try to retrieve the core, Alara added. Caleb's eyes narrowed. What core? Alara swallowed. The ring chamber, the heart, and it can be moved. It can be installed somewhere else, like a portable mind lock, Alara said. A cage you can carry. Caleb felt clarity go cold in his chest. So the flood was not a full kill. Alara held his gaze. No, Caleb straightened. Then we finish it. Alara's hand trembled and reached toward him through the pod opening. Her fingers barely brushed his glove. It will try again, Alara whispered. And next time it will not wade under ice. Caleb looked down at her hand, then back at her face. Then next time it meets people who are ready. At dawn over Calderis, the sky was a dim band of gray above endless white. The rail tower hummed as transport capsules docked and delivered more officers and more equipment. Heliarcha's legal team arrived next, not in armor, but in warm suits and clean words. They carried injunction packets and claim documents and a request to seize all data devices. They were turned away, not because the system grew brave, but because the OpenNet feed had spread too wide. Public attention had attached itself to this like ice to metal. A senior investigator met Caleb near the tower entrance and kept their voice low. We have a problem. Caleb's eyes stayed steady. What kind? The flood cooled the ship, the senior investigator said. But it did not shut it down. There is still internal heat. Caleb's stomach tightened. The core is still active. The senior investigator nodded. We detected low-level pulses again, faint but present. Caleb looked toward the distant basin and saw steam rising in thin wisps. Mara stepped beside him with her tablet in hand. Heliarch is filing emergency motions to take control, Mara said. They claim they can contain it better than the authorities. Caleb's voice was flat. They will contain it by owning it. Alara appeared behind them wrapped in blankets and supported by 2 medical technicians. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp. They will bring a clean team, Alara said. Not to erase, to extract. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then we stopped the extraction. The senior investigator hesitated. We are not an assault unit. Caleb looked at them. Then do not assault, block access, cut rail travel, lock the zone. The senior investigator swallowed. Heliarch has influence. Caleb's gaze stayed cold. So does fear use it? Mara's hands tightened around her tablet. We do not have proof they will extract. Alara answered without raising her voice. I am proof. Caleb looked at Alara. Can you guide us to the core without the rhythm catching us? Alara hesitated. I can help you resist, but there is no perfect shield. The only real shield is distance and disruption, Alara said. And speed. Caleb nodded once. Then we do it fast. A transport alarm sounded outside, and a new craft settled on the ice flats beyond the rail tower. It was sleeker than patrol units and painted in corporate gray. Director Rook of Heliarch stepped out with a new team, heavier gear, stronger cutters, and drones hovering low like metal insects. She walked toward the tower with calm that said she would burn rules if they stood in her way. Rook stopped in front of the tower gate and raised her voice. By corporate emergency authority and claims security statute, I am taking custody of the Calderis artifact. The senior investigator stepped forward, voice tense. Director Rook, you are under investigation. You will stand down. Rook's visor turned slightly and locked onto Alara behind them. Dr. Sin, you came out. That is good. Alara's face tightened. You do not get to speak to me. Rook stayed smooth. I get to speak to you because you're property under contract. Alara's eyes flashed. You forged my contract. Rook answered like it was weather. Contracts are what survive in the cold. Caleb stepped forward. Walk away, Rook. Rook's visor turned to him. Mr. Stroud, you made yourself a nuisance. Caleb's voice was quiet. I made myself a witness. Rook paused, then spoke. You do not understand scale. This is bigger than your rescue morals. Caleb kept his eyes steady. This is exactly my scale, people. Rook lifted her hand, and drones rose slightly with cutters spinning. Patrol officers raised rifles, and tension snapped tight across the ice flats. Alara whispered to Caleb, barely audible. Do not. Let them take the core, and if they move it, it becomes portable. Caleb nodded once and leaned close to Mara. Can you broadcast again? Mara swallowed. Yes. Do it live, Caleb said. Mara's fingers moved, and a line on her tablet read, Live stream active. Rook's posture stiffened. Turn that off, Rook said. Mara's voice shook, but held. No. Rook's drones surged forward, and Caleb moved first. He sprinted toward the craft Rook arrived in, not toward her team. He did not fight the wall. He hit the lever behind it. The cargo bay was cracked open, and inside, he saw containment foam and extraction tools. A core retrieval kit, clean and ready. Caleb threw a smoke canister into the bay and followed it into the gray cloud. A guard shouted and fired a shot that struck the craft hull and threw sparks. Caleb ignored it and grabbed the nearest crate. Inside was a ring clamp designed to lock onto a circular object and stabilize it for transport. They were not here to quarantine. They were here to steal the heart. Caleb lifted the clamp and tossed it out into the snow. Then he ripped open the next crate. It held a portable dampener array, the kind Rook claimed to have. It looked like ear protection for the nervous system, a tool to stand close without fully falling in. Caleb slammed the crate lid shut and jammed a flare into it, igniting it. The crate began to smoke and melt. Outside, Rook shouted orders and boots crunched toward the craft. Caleb moved deeper into the cargo bay and found the fuel line access. He cut the fuel line with his thermal saw and volatile vapor hissed out. Caleb tossed a second flare into the bay. Fire erupted, contained at first, then spreading along foam and fabric. Guards shouted and stumbled back as heat bloomed in the wind. Caleb jumped out into the snow and rolled to kill stray embers on his suit. Director Rook of Heliarch stood 10 paces away, visor fixed on him. Her voice was no longer calm. "You are insane." Caleb stood and faced her. "No, I am committed." Rook raised her rifle, and Caleb already had his baton. He struck the nearest drone as it lunged and cracked its rotor housing. The drone spun out and crashed into the snow. 2 more drones surged, and Caleb used wind and smoke as cover while he closed distance. Up close, cutters could not slice cleanly. Caleb disabled 1 drone, then another with impacts that jammed housings and twisted mounts. Rook's guards advanced, but patrol officers intercepted, and the ice flats became shouted commands and shifting lines. Mara's live feed captured all without mercy. Alara's voice came through the channel, strained. The rhythm is pulsing again, and the core senses conflict. Caleb felt it too, faint but insistent, like a distant drum inside his chest. In fighting, they were providing bodies and stress and proximity. The core did not care who won. It only cared that people were close enough to synchronize. Caleb shouted to the senior investigator, "Pull your people back now." The senior investigator hesitated. "They are attacking." Caleb's voice went hard. "If you stay close, you lose your minds, back off." The senior investigator saw tremors in hands and changes in breathing. They signaled retreat, and patrol officers began to pull away. Rook did not retreat and stepped closer, eyes on Caleb. Her voice dropped, and it sounded like a confession. "This could end wars," Rook said. Caleb's eyes stayed cold. "By turning people into puppets. By making them predictable," Rook said. "Safe." Alara cut in, louder. "Safe for you, not safe for them." Rook's visor snapped toward Alara in anger and fear mixed in her stance. Then Rook made her irreversible choice and signaled her team to push toward the rail tower gate. Extraction was still her objective. Caleb moved to block the path, and the pulse surged stronger than before. A guard near Rook staggered, then turned, rifle swinging toward Caleb as if guided. The guard fired. The shot missed Caleb by inches and struck the rail tower panel, throwing sparks. Mara screamed, and officers shouted. Rook froze, shocked, then tried to shout at the guard, but the guard did not respond. The guard was no longer fully himself. Alara's voice tightened. "It is taking him." Caleb ran toward the guard and struck the rifle barrel down. He hit the guard's shoulder and knocked the guard off balance into the snow. Caleb knelt and pinned the guard with controlled weight. The guard's body trembled violently and breath came in sharp bursts. Caleb spoke close to the helmet. "Breathe with me." The guard did not hear him, or could not. "Elada shote, do." Not match it. Caleb pressed his glove to the guard's chest plate and felt the heart racing, trying to lock onto the pulse. Caleb forced his own breathing slow and steady, giving a different beat to follow. "Follow my voice," Caleb said. The guard tremors eased slightly, like a calmer rhythm offered an anchor. Caleb looked up and saw Rook watching, posture rigid. This was no longer a claim dispute. This was a thing that could eat minds. Caleb stood and stepped toward Director Rook of Heliarch. Call them off, right now. Rook's voice was tight. You lit my craft on fire. Caleb's tone did not change. I will light more, call them off. Rook's shoulders lowered slightly, the first sign of defeat. She gestured and her team hesitated. The pulse surged again and a half-broken drone jerked to life as if pulled by invisible strings. It rose and spun toward Alara. Caleb moved without thought and threw his baton. It struck the rotor housing and shattered it. The drone crashed into the snow a meter from Alara. Alara flinched, then steadied, eyes locked on Caleb. Caleb retrieved his baton and looked at Rook. Do you see it now? He asked. Rook's voice came quietly. Yes. Caleb's eyes stayed hard. Then choose. Rook stood still for a long second. Then she lifted her hands slightly, palms open. My team stands down, Rook said. The ice flats fell into tense quiet, broken by wind and the distant crack of shifting ice near the flooded basin. Mara's live feed kept running, and the silence felt heavier than gunfire. Caleb looked at the senior investigator. Lock the zone. No corporate access. No extraction. The senior investigator nodded, shaken. We will. Rook turned away slowly, posture controlled, but smaller now. She walked back toward her burning craft, and even in retreat, she looked like she was calculating. Alara leaned close to Caleb and whispered, She will come again, but not like this. Caleb's voice was low. Then we finish it before she does. 6 hours later, a perimeter ring of lights and patrol craft hovered above the flooded basin. Caleb stood on the ridge with Mara at his right and Alara at his left, all three watching steam drift in weak light. A technician approached and spoke quickly. We have a reading from the ship. The pulse is faint, but it is still there. Mara's face tightened. The plated creatures. Alara's eyes narrowed. They are guardians, and they were not meant to wake in water. Caleb kept his voice flat. Can we reach the core? The technician hesitated. We can deploy a submersible drone, but the interior is unstable. Alara looked at Caleb. If you can get a jammer close enough to the ring chamber again, you could disrupt the rhythm. Disruption is not destruction, Alara added. Caleb kept his eyes on the basin. What destroys it? Alara swallowed. A full power collapse, starve it, then break the ring. Mara's hands tightened. How do we break it if we cannot reach it? Alara looked toward the drill unit, still half buried in snow, now shut down. You have one weapon the ship cannot reason with pressure. Caleb turned to her. You mean implode it? Alara nodded faintly. Seal vents, force a pressure spike in the chamber, and the ring will fail. Mara's face paled. That could scatter fragments into the ice. Alara's voice tightened. Better fragments than a portable mind lock. Caleb moved through the steps like a checklist. Do you have demolition foam? The senior investigator blinked. We have hull sealant and structural foam. Caleb nodded. We use it. Mara looked at Caleb. That is risky. Caleb answered without heat. So is leaving it. Alara held his gaze. If you do this, it might kill the Guardians too. Caleb did not flinch. They're already being used. They moved fast. Patrol teams deployed foam barriers around the basin edge, sealing drainage routes so water would pool deeper. Pumps redirected meltwater back into the trench, accelerating the flood. Submersible drones descended into dark water, lights slicing through rippling black. Caleb watched a live drone feed on a monitor. The ship lay beneath, partially submerged, corridors turning into underwater caves as frost melted into drifting particles. One plated creature floated in the feed, limbs moving slow and disoriented. Its ridged head turned toward the drone, and the faint pulse on the audio channel ticked faster. Alara leaned close to the monitor. It is trying even now. The drone moved deeper, guided by Alara's directions. Left down, follow the cable trunk. The drone reached the ring chamber entrance, and the door was half open, warped by heat and flood. Inside, the ring apparatus glowed, faintly underwater, and bubbles rose from it as if it breathed. Caleb heard the pulse through the monitor speakers, faint but insistent. It felt like a distant drum that wanted a body again. Alara's voice tightened. We need to seal the chamber vents, and if we block pressure release, the next thermal surge will spike pressure. Mara looked at foam canisters. The drones can deploy foam. Caleb nodded. Do it. The drone extended a nozzle and sprayed foam into vent seams around the chamber. The foam expanded and hardened fast, gripping metal and closing gaps. Alara watched, jaw clenched. More, seal every seam. The drone continued until vents were encased. Caleb looked at the drill unit through the tower window. We need heat again, Caleb said. The senior investigator hesitated. We shut it down for safety. Caleb's voice went hard. Turn on. Mara stepped forward and took control again, hand steadier now. If I overheat it, it will crack the shelf further. Caleb nodded. We want a controlled crack, direct heat toward the ring chamber zone. Mara engaged the drill and deep vibrations rolled through the ice. In the monitor feed, bubbles increased around the ring as internal heat surged under external pressure. Alara's eyes widened. It feels it, and it will try to vent. The pulse in the speakers sped up, then layered into a pattern that made Caleb's skin crawl. A translation line on the monitor flashed that read, pressure rising. A second line appeared that read, sink attempt imminent. Caleb's jaw tightened. It is trying to force synchronization before it breaks, Caleb said. Il a snaped, urgent. Do not listen to it, and do not let anyone near the basin edge without dampeners. The senior investigator shouted orders, and patrol teams backed off the ridge. Caleb watched the feed as the ring glow intensified and the foam seals bulged under pressure. Mara held the drill controls, and her knuckles went white. How long? Mara asked. Alara answered tight. Until it vents or ruptures. The ring apparatus flared with a sudden surge of light. The drone feed shook violently as a shockwave hit it underwater. A deep underwater crack filled the speakers. Then the ring chamber collapsed inward. Water rushed in carrying fragments and bubbles, and a sudden absolute silence followed. The pulse vanished and the audio line stayed flat. Caleb stared at it, waiting for the beat to return. It did not. Alara's shoulders sagged and she closed her eyes briefly, like letting go of a weight she carried too long. Mara whispered, is it gone? Alara opened her eyes and tears glinted, but did not fall. The heart is broken, and it cannot synchronize without a core rhythm. Caleb exhaled slowly and did not celebrate. He only noted the objective completed. The senior investigator looked at him, shaken. We just destroyed a piece of unknown technology. Caleb's voice stayed flat. We destroyed a weapon. Rook's craft burned out on the ice flats behind the perimeter, a dark ruin. Heliarch would still fight in courts and in shadows, but the thing they came for was now fragments underwater. Alara leaned close to Caleb, voice low. You saved more people than you will ever meet. Caleb kept his gaze on the basin. I'm not done. Mara blinked. What do you mean? Caleb turned slightly and looked toward the horizon where the rail line disappeared. If they tried this here, they will try it somewhere else. Alara answered quiet. Not with this core. Caleb's tone stayed cold. No, with the next one. Mara looked at him, confused, and Caleb reached into his sling. He pulled out a small object he took earlier without comment. The cracked helmet tag serial from the dead contractor. He held it in his glove like a reminder. We publish everything, names, dates, locations, and the pattern. Mara nodded, voice firm. Already started. Alara held Caleb's eyes. Heliarch will come for me. Caleb answered immediately. Then you stay close. Alara swallowed. You do not even know me. Caleb stayed calm. I know what they did to you, and that is enough. A patrol officer approached holding a tablet. We are getting messages, a lot of them, and people watching your stream are sending tips. Mara frowned. Tips about what? The officer hesitated. Other sites, other claims, and other missing contractors. Caleb felt his stomach tighten, not with fear, but with the cold certainty of a larger map. He took the tablet and scrolled until one message stood out. It was short, precise, tagged with coordinates and a single sentence. It said there was a fresh route cut into an ice shelf on a different moon, and someone was trying to hide it. Caleb's eyes narrowed as he read it. He handed the tablet back to Mara. Save that, he said. Mara blinked. For later, Caleb's voice stayed low. For next time, Caleb stood at the rail tower window and watched steam fade from the flooded basin. The pulse was gone, but the quiet felt earned, not gentle. Behind him, Dr. Alarison slept under a thin blanket of heat coils. Mara's tablet kept blinking as the truth kept spreading. Caleb did not smile, and he did not celebrate. He only let himself breathe, like someone who had finally closed a door that should never have been opened. Out on the ice flats, the wind kept moving, as if the moon had already forgotten the names of the people it tried to take. Caleb would not forget. He picked up the cracked helmet tag one more time, turned it in his glove, and tucked it away like a promise. Somewhere else, another shelf was being cut and another route was being hidden. Another heartbeat was waiting for a body to borrow. Caleb looked toward the horizon and made the same decision he always made. He would go. If you enjoyed this story, hit like so it can reach more listeners who love sci-fi survival and hard choices. Share it with a friend who listens on long drives or late nights. And if you want more full-length sci-fi thrillers like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the next rescue is already moving.